Company business. Thank you very much.
Well, welcome back to another edition of Sky Blue History with Jim Brown and myself, Claudio Cardellino. Tonight we're going to talk about the years from 1936 to 1939, the pre-war years, and of course it was the booming 30s for the Sky Blues, although they weren't called the Sky Blues then, they were called the Bantams. And it wasn't until the arrival of manager Harry Storer in 1931 that the fortunes improved of our club. And interesting, isn't it, Jim, that a bit similar to now with the times of austerity, how fortunes have improved on the pitch. We had the Great Depression, but it wasn't that depressing on the pitch at all, was it, in the 1930s?
No. Good evening, Claudio.
Good evening.
Yes. Well, Coventry City had been in the Football League 11 years when Harry Storer arrived, and it had been 11 pretty miserable years, to be honest. We never looked like getting out of Division 3 South, and Harry arrived, and we had some good years in the early 30s, but it all culminated in the side winning promotion to the second division, the old second division, in 1936, which was the first the first promotion the club had ever got in the Football League. And the summer of 1936 was Highfield Road was a hive of activity, as they built a new stand over the summer, believe it or not, which was what became known as the main stand. But older fans will remember that was the one that burnt down in 1968. But back in 36, it was called the promotion stand, and it was a pretty impressive edifice, to be honest. It replaced the old John Bull stand that had stood since 1899.
And was it seated, the new stand then?
It was all seated, yeah, with a small, I say small, it had a paddock in front of it.
Right.
And the players came out on the halfway line for the first time. Previously, they'd come out, the dressing rooms had been on the opposite side of the pitch, and the players had come out in the corner by the cop.
So that was the style of the stand pretty much until we had seats at the front. Because I can remember there was standing down there before, wasn't there? I think in the 70s as well.
Yeah, yes. The replacement of the main stand, it did have. God, now you've got me.
I'm sure it did in front of the boxes.
It did,
at ground level.
Yes, it did, and then they put some seats in there at some stage. But going back to 1936, things were buzzing in the city, and everyone was very excited. We were going into the second division, and there were no major new signings that summer. Other than a halfback called Jack Archer arrived from Everton, but other than that, it was the side that had won promotion which kicked off the season. And the first game of the season was away at Doncaster, where they got a 1-1 draw with a George McNestry goal. But it's interesting if you look back at that, the teams in the second division that season. The mighty Aston Villa were in there. They'd been relegated from the first division for the first time ever. They were inaugural members in 1888. It's the first time they got relegated. And the same applied to Blackburn Rovers. They were playing in the second division for the first time. We also had Newcastle United, who'd been a big force in the 1920s. We had Tottenham, who had been a major force. Who else did we have? We had Nottingham Forest. We had local rivals Leicester.
Oh yes, and Sheffield United. I mean, they've been
Sheffield United. Yeah, big. They were a big club in the 1920s.
And Burnley.
We had. Did we have Burnley? Yes, we had Burnley. We had Blackpool. We had Fulham. We had Norwich, and then we had Chesterfield. They were in the second division. Doncaster Road, I've already mentioned. We had Bradford Park Avenue. So some of these were new grounds for City, including the first ever league visit to Villa Park. The one thing that was hanging over the club was how to pay for this new stand, though. And they eventually they tried to get local businessmen to make donations, but the fund didn't really get going. And in the end, they ended up getting a mortgage, well, borrowing the money basically from a guy called Sir John Sidley, who was famous for the Armstrong Sidley airplane factory in the city, a very wealthy man. And they took out a £20,000 loan from him to help pay for the new stand. The first home game was midweek game, a Monday night game against Swansea. They won 2-1, and our third division hero, Clary Borton, got the winning goal. But the new stand wasn't ready to be used. They hadn't finished putting all the seats in.
Throughout our history, that's happened. I think virtually every new stand, we've not had it opened on time. Yes.
Yeah. But interestingly, the on the Saturday prior to that, when City were at Doncaster, the reserves had kicked off the season with a home game against Arsenal reserves, and almost 12,000 were at that reserve game, which is staggering, isn't it?
It is. And it must have been a weird time as well, because obviously there's stuff going on in Europe, and times are changing, and obviously we know there's the war years to ahead of us here, but times were changing in Europe and things were moving along.
Yes.
And it's almost like they were kind of oblivious in this country and just kept on doing their own thing, because the crowds were pretty good, weren't they?
They were excellent. Yeah, it was the highest attendances the club had since they joined the league. You know, they were averaging well over 20,000, and getting, well, when they played Villa at home in February '37, they had 39,800 there. Obviously, Villa had brought a lot of fans over from Birmingham. So the season was very good because they had a slightly dodgy start. They lost 2 out of the first 4 games, then went on a 6 or 7 unbeaten run. In fact, they only lost 1 of their next 14 games. So really, really good run. The home form was excellent, of course. That was a carryover from the third division days. But they had good away wins at Norwich, 3-0 at Norwich. They won at Bradford 3-1. They drew at Bramall Lane. The only defeat in that run was at Leicester, and Leicester were a major force. Leicester ended up winning the title that season and did the double over us. And in the middle of that run, we played at Villa Park. And would you believe that almost 64,000 at Villa Park for that? Loads and loads of City fans, probably about 10 or 15,000 City fans travelled to Villa Park. You can imagine, you know what Villa Park's like, mainly 64,000 in there.
Well, I'm thinking about the travelling as well, because I'd imagine there'd have been, it'd have to be on coaches. Would they go on the train? Mainly coaches, I'd have thought, wouldn't it?
There'd have been trains, coaches, and people, a lot of fans went on bicycle. Yeah,
That's
it was very,
fantastic.
yeah, that wasn't out of the question to go to Birmingham on a bike.
They wouldn't get nicked in those days, would it?
No.
I mean, all the bikes look the same, so you didn't know if you got your own bike on the way home, I suppose. You could be riding somebody else's.
Yes. So the game at Villa Park was a dour 0-0 draw, which is a good result for City. I think Villa were struggling to adapt to second division football, and they ended up missing out on promotion that season. So as I said, it was an excellent season. They were, after the initial poor start, they were rarely out of the top six until the last sort of 6 weeks of the season, when they tailed off a bit, and they ended up finishing 8th. But they had a good cup run, which is interesting. They, in the third round, they were drawn at home to Charlton Athletic, and Charlton had won 2 promotions in successive years. They'd gone from the 3rd Division South to the 1st Division in 2 seasons, just like Ipswich have done this season.
Yeah.
But not only that, when we met them in the Cup in January, they were top of the 1st Division.
Right.
So when we beat them 2-0 at Highfield Road, that was a great scalp. You know, Billy Lake scored both goals. And in the 4th round, they had another home draw against Chester. They won 2-0. And the 5th round, which was the furthest the club have got since 1910, they drew West Bromwich Albion at home, who were a top 1st Division club. Massive interest in that game. About 15,000 Albion fans there. Gates were locked, over 44,000, a new club record crowd for Highfield Road, 44,492. Massive interest, cracking game. I think we came from 2-0 down to draw to level to 2-2, and then Albion got a late winner. But a great performance. As I said, the league form suffered a little bit after that, a bit like this season.
Yeah.
In fact, they only won 2 out of 12 games.
I mean, the fact you said we played West Brom in the next round, I thought we were going out. That's just this historical thing. It started way back then.
Yeah, that's right. So it was a good season. And looking at the players who played, there were players who came out of the 3rd Division who adapted very, very well to second division football. The goalkeeper, Bill Morgan, quite a youngster. He was ever present. Jack Astley, right back, was ever present, 42 league games. George Mason, the captain and centre half, 42. You know, so 3 ever presents in the side. Where the chap, Clary Borton, of course, was still the centre forward, but he struggled a bit. He only got 9 goals in 36 games. And I think there were question marks, you know, is Clary good enough for the second division, were being asked. Leslie Jones, the inside forward, had a very good season. He was attracting interest from big clubs. We had a new, who was the top scorer that season? It was Clary got 9, Jones got 9, and Billy McDonald, a Scots signing from Airdrie, I think, he got 9. So 3 players got 9 goals. You know, when you compare that to Borton's record, he hadn't scored less than 20 goals in the last 6 seasons. So it's a bit of a come down for him.
Do you think it was just a step up then, even in those days?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think how old he would have been.
Because we had we been in the second division before, hadn't we? in the 20s? Had we gone up there and gone down again?
No, we'd started in the second division.
Sorry.
When we joined the league in 1919, there were only 2 divisions, and we got elected into the second division. But yeah, we were never out the bottom 3, basically. And eventually got relegated in 25.
Sorry, yeah, so we got relegated to the third,
So we'd been in the third division. We'd been in the third division since 1925. So let me just check on Clary's on how old Clary was, because
born in 1908. Is that right?
Yeah, so he was only 29 at this stage.
Right.
But I don't know, he did struggle. He did struggle. So all in all, it was a good season, but the style of play had changed a bit. You know, previously they got, 100 goals in 4 out of the last 5 seasons in the third division. They only managed 66 in the second division, but a much tighter defence, only 54 conceded. So there's much more emphasis on defence. You know, there's a lot more clean sheets, and a lot less 5-0 wins, which have been
because didn't we have was that the last time in Division 2 then in the 30s where we had 2 or 3 players on 20 league goals? Because there was a lot of talk this season, wasn't there, about players getting to 20 goals, and you pointed out where they're not 20 league goals.
No, that's right. In fact, the promotion season before 1936, Bourton had got 23, McNestry got 20, and Jones got 23. So, you know, 3, that was all in league games. So there was a bit of a come down in the goals for column. The one player who came into the side that is interesting is an Irish winger called Jackie Brown. He was a right winger, and they signed him in the October, and he made a big impression. He was he got 13 goals so he was top scorer, 13 goals from 29 games from the right wing. Very quick, good shot on him, and he won his first Irish caps that season. Signed from Wolves. So all in all, a very good first season. So then we move on to 37-38 season. And that's when there'd been a lot of letters to the Coventry Telegraph about the team's scruffy kit.
So for those who can see, we've got the podcast, and of course we're on YouTube as well. So the kit behind you, is that the newer kit or the scruffy kit?
That's the new kit.
Right.
Yeah, with a white panel down the centre.
Yeah.
With thinner blue panels either side, and a little open neck with string in the neck. Very, very smart kit, and obviously kept the blue and white tradition. So that was introduced at the start of the season. They had an amazing start to the season, unbeaten for the first 15 games, the best start the club ever had. And that included 4 or 5 draws. Amazing run. They were top of the league in October. The side relegated from the first division the previous year was Manchester United, believe it or not.
That's incredible, because I think Manchester City won the league, didn't they, that year? And Man United got relegated.
They did, yeah. So we met Man United at home, second game of the season. they weren't the big name they became in the 50s and 60s. In fact, I think Man City were the bigger name. United had won the league back in the Edwardian age, but they hadn't won anything for probably 25 years. So a big crowd at Highfield Road for the Monday night game. It would have been a 6:30 kickoff, so that could finish in daylight. No floodlights then, of course. 30,566 at Highfield Road. A week later, these are the days when they played the same team a week later on their ground. So we travelled to Old Trafford a week later and got a very creditable 2-2 draw. The crowd at Old Trafford, 17,500.
17?
So, yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so we were getting bigger gates than Man United.
17,000?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It is. It is. We had a new centre forward signed that summer, Magnus McPhee.
Was he Scottish?
Yeah, I think so. And he got the nod over Clary for the first 3 games of the season. Yeah, he didn't find the net, so Clary came back in. But Clary only played 5 more games, and he didn't score, and he left for Bristol City before Christmas. So it was the end of a legend, really. So 15 games unbeaten start, and that included going to Villa Park. This time Villa were in form. Attendance, 67,000.
Yeah, and it's a record for a second-tier match. Still is a record.
I believe it is, yes.
Yeah, second is, I think the year before is the 3rd highest attendance. The one in between is, I think it's Man United Sunderland from 73-4 season.
Right.
But yeah, we've got the top both against Villa, of course.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just incredible, isn't it? That's a lot of movement of people. I know. I mean, we take that. That's nowadays. That's an easy attendance to deal with, isn't it? But it's a lot of movement. When, like you say, it's basically a lot of public transport. You say people cycling. There wouldn't have been as many cars as there are now.
No.
It's incredible. At a time when, like I says, I mean, with 37, 38, there's even more warning signs there could be a war ahead. And like I said, people just seem to be getting on with their lives, and it's incredible, really.
I seem to remember the Coventry Telegraph described the traffic from Coventry to Birmingham as being just an endless stream of traffic along the Birmingham Road. So there would be a fair few motor cars, but not like now.
Yeah.
No.
So would that be the A45 now then?
Yeah.
Obviously, the M6 wouldn't have been there, would it?
No.
That's brilliant.
And there wouldn't have been any dual carriageway along that road. No.
It would be fascinating, wouldn't it, if you'd had the chance to actually be there, just to witness the whole.
Oh yeah, wouldn't it be great to be Doctor Who and get transported back to Villa Park in 1937
with your flat cap?
Yes. Yeah.
We'd all be wearing flat caps, wouldn't we?
We would. So the 15-game run ended at Highfield Road. Sheffield Wednesday beat us 1-0. But we were still, I think we were still top of the table after that. So I'm just looking this up because, Sheffield Wednesday won 1-0 at Highfield Road, and we stayed top. We bounced back from that and won 3 in a row. Won 3-1 at Blackburn, won 4-3 at Fulham, and beat Plymouth 4-0 at home. And we got knocked off the top on Christmas Day at Bramall Lane. by Sheffield United. We were 2-0 up and lost 3-2. And that was a game that was played in fog. And the eyewitnesses said that they didn't know the score. They didn't see the goals at the other end of the pitch. So at the end of the game, they didn't actually know what the final score was.
I mean, and that game is quite decisive, isn't it? I think, because they finished just above us in the league.
They did. They finished 1 point ahead of us. And we played the return 2 days later at Highfield Road. And it was a 2-2 draw. Again, we were 2-0 up with 19 minutes left. And they scored equaliser in the 89th minute. Attendance 40,700 at Highfield Road.
That is
remarkable,
fantastic.
Isn't it?
Yeah, and yeah, well, those two. Yeah, if you reverse the scores, well, especially the first game, well, if we'd have held on to the league in both matches, I know it was 2 points for win. Then I think that would have been enough, possibly, to have got us promoted.
It would. Because we were never out of the top four all season. It's tremendous. If you can imagine that these days, never being out the top four, and we'd been in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I was saying that they lost at Bramall Lane on Christmas Day. They had a shock FA Cup defeat. They lost to third division York City, 3-2. Maybe manager Harry Storer thought, let's concentrate on the league.
Rest a few players.
He didn't rest anybody. It was the same team that played the previous game. In the meantime, they'd sold Leslie Jones to Arsenal. Les they called him. He was a Welsh international, remarkable inside forward, and Arsenal paid a lot of money. I don't know the exact fee because there was an Arsenal player was a mate weight in the deal, part exchange, a guy called Bobby Davidson who played in the Arsenal first team the previous year, quite a few games. He was supposed to be the replacement at Highbury for Alex James, scheming Scottish inside forward, but he never really he never filled James's boots. So he came to Coventry as part exchange, and we lost Jones. That was at the end of October. In fact, Jones's last game was the week before the Villa game. We also had two new wingers that season. We had a guy called George Taylor signed from Bolton, and Brown moved over to the left wing. So one new winger, and Brown was pretty hot again. He got another 13 goals, top scorer for the second year running, which is interesting for a winger. You don't very often see wingers top scoring.
No.
So the crucial time came in April, obviously, at Easter. So I will come to it. So at Easter, we were second after Easter. We beat Barnsley 1-0 on Easter Tuesday. And then we played Fulham on the following Saturday. And to be honest, promotion looks certain, and that after that Barnsley game. Where are we? April the 19th. So we were second behind the Villa. Villa had 51 points. We had 51 points. Sheffield United had 51, but had played a game more. Man United were fourth with 49 from 39 games. So, they just had to hold their nerve and get three decent results, and they were up. And they went and blew it, lost at home to Fulham.
Oh,
They were in the
no.
bottom half of the table.
Yeah.
And then they went to Plymouth the following Saturday, lost 3-1. On the final day, even if they had a faint hope on the final day, they went to Stockport, and if they'd won, they would have been level on points with Sheffield United, but they only drew to the bottom club in the league.
Oh dear. So we had 3 favourable fixtures where they must have thought they'd probably win all 3, and they got 1 point.
Yeah.
And looking at it, they needed 2 points more. They needed 3 points out of the last 3 matches then, and they'd have been promoted. It would have been incredible.
Yeah, so they ended up 4th, 2 points behind second place Sheffield United. Villa were champions and went straight back up. And as I said, Sheffield United were runners up. So that was, so close. So close.
That's it would have changed the course of our history, wouldn't it? Because you don't, obviously, with the following season, and then you've got the war years, haven't you, where everything stopped for a while, obviously. So that was 37-38, and of course, you got 38-39.
38-39, yeah. Now we had some youngsters coming into the team. We had a right winger called Les Warner, nicknamed Plum, after the cricketer of that era, Plum Warner, who was England batsman. We had Ted Roberts at centre forward. He got 14 games that season.
Jim, going back to the last season, it would have been Man United who got promoted in 2nd place.
It was, I beg your pardon, Man United. Yeah, Sheffield finished 3rd.
Because they went up, and then Manchester City got relegated after winning the league, which is astonishing.
Yes, that's right. So they passed each other.
That's it. Imagine if it happened this season.
Yeah, so the other youngsters they had, as I said, was Ted Roberts. They had a centre forward called Ellis Lager, who was a big, bustling centre forward. He got 13 goals from 26 starts. And they had Tommy Crawley, another striker, who scored 14 goals in 18 games. They had Alf Wood, the goalkeeper, young Alf Wood. He played 1 game that season, standing in for the injured Bill Morgan. So there were lots of youngsters coming through. There weren't many big signings, though. One signing they did make was George Ashall from Wolves. He was a left winger, and a year earlier he'd been on the verge of the England team. He played for the Football League representative team, and say was on the verge of getting an England cap. So he was seen as a big signing. But they hadn't really spent the money they got from selling Jones. So it wasn't, the fans were still saying, do you really want promotion, Coventry City? They've been close twice. And the 38-39 season didn't start great. They didn't win any of their first 3 games. They were struggling at the bottom half.
Looking at the division, you got Sheffield Wednesday and Sheffield United, Blackburn Rovers, Man City, Spurs, Newcastle, West Brom, West Ham. There's some big clubs in there.
Yeah,
and even in those days.
Guess who'd come up from Division 3 North? Tranmere Rovers.
Oh. That's of course West Ham, Newcastle, Tottenham, they've yet to play in the third tier, aren't there? There's 8 teams who haven't played in the third tier. There are 3 of them.
Right.
Yeah.
So they were, as a stuttering start. They got it together in October time. Good home win against Newcastle, 1-0. A good draw at Hillsborough. Wednesday we're up there, and we got a good draw there. We won 2-0 at Blackburn. Went to Main Road and lost 3-0. That was disappointing. Man City was strong, of course. 38,000 at Main Road that day. Then they won 4 in a row to take them up into the top 6 just before Christmas, and they were on an excellent run. They beat Spurs 4-0 on New Year's Eve. I think Spurs were mid-table. Blackburn were leading the division. Newcastle weren't far behind them. Sheffield United, and then we were up there just behind Sheffield United. So the cup came in January as usual. Another shock. We got beat at Chester. Lowly third division Chester. Lost 1-0 there. So maybe Harry again saying, let's concentrate on the league. Meanwhile, as you said before, things were looking a bit hairy in Europe. You know, we'd had Hitler taking over the Sudetenland, the famous Neville Chamberlain trip to Munich, and Churchill making his predictions of doom in the House of Commons. Things were looking a bit hairy on the geopolitical scene. The City stayed in the top 4 or 5 through the spring. Had some good results. Tommy Crawley had an amazing run. He came back into the side in January, and he scored in 6 successive games between Christmas and the end of January. He got a hat-trick in a 5-1 win over Forest. He got 2 against Southampton in a 2-0 win. He got 2 at Newcastle in a 4-0 win at St James's Park. So things were buzzing, you know, and people were saying, maybe we're going to do it this year. 3rd time lucky.
I read something that this is to do with Fulham, and they're in our division at the time. And on the 21st of January 1939, they went to Stamford Bridge for a local derby cup tie, a 3rd round tie, 69,987. Obviously, they're next door to each other. 2 days later, they're back there, Craven Cottage home for a Division 2 game against Swansea, 3,000.
Well, that would have been played in a midweek afternoon.
Yeah, it would have been, wouldn't it, I suppose.
That's why everybody was at work. But City had the same thing in 36-7. We had a Monday afternoon game against Leicester. Leicester were top of the league, and the attendance, this is February, was 14,000. We've been on a Saturday, it would have been 40,000.
Yeah, this is. I mean, we both collect football programs, and for other collectors, this is the problem you'll find if you're looking for seasons way back, is exactly this, where it wasn't always big crowds, and of course, you know, they didn't publish that many programs. No, because it could just be wasted. And
the club policy back then was midweek. If it was a midweek game, however important, it would be a team sheet only. It wouldn't be a full program.
Yeah.
And yet the reserves on a Saturday, if they played on a Saturday, the reserves would have a full program.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Doesn't make sense, does it?
No. I mean, I know a bit later on, I've got like the 4-page program for midweek games.
Yeah.
Because I'll be looking at Oh, I mean, I've only got a couple missing now. But when I was trying to find the ones I had missing, I just couldn't understand why is there such a problem. And then you kind of explained to me about there's so many midweek games with like the smaller programs, nothing in them, basically. And they're the hard ones to get because they obviously didn't produce as many either.
No.
So whereas those in the 60s, they were just printing thousands, weren't they? Because they knew they'd be getting thousands, so they needed thousands. But I suppose in the 1930s, they didn't have to.
And when you look at the I've looked at the minutes, the board minutes of the club. In the 1930s, it was always minuted how many programs they were going to print for the following game, and it was always 2,500 for a Saturday game. So you've got a crowd of maybe 25,000, and there's only 2,500 programs, and you wonder how many have survived 80 or 90 years to today, and there won't be many, will there?
Whether they survived the Blitz as well, because
Well, yeah,
you got that as well, haven't you? I've got a moving away from Coventry slightly. I had a Bolton Tottenham program from 1960-61, and it was worth about £300, purely because the week before Bolton played Blackburn, and there wasn't a very big crowd, which was a surprise for a Bolton-Blackburn match. So when they played Tottenham, this is the double winning season for Tottenham, but at the start of the season, they decided to print half as many, but a big crowd turned up. So they ran out of programs, and that's why this program is quite rare.
Yes.
So they even did it in the 60s, where they decided, it's a midweek game, we better not print so many, which is understandable.
Yes.
And of course, in later years, you used to just have the same program from the first time round with just a sheet of paper in there, didn't you?
Very often, yes. Very often.
Which made no sense when you looked at the program.
But in the promotion season, Coventry played Luton at Easter, and because that was classified as a midweek game, they only printed 2,500 sheets, or 4 pages, one sheet folded over, and there was a 42,000 crowd there. So and people didn't keep team sheets, did they?
No.
Yeah, how many of those survive? I wonder.
Have you got one? Have you got a copy of it, a scanned copy, or?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Somebody will have.
So back to 38-9. The sort of promotion run fizzled out in March time. They lost 3 out of 4 games, only picked up 1 point, and they had a reasonable end to the season, but they were never really in contention of going up. They finished 4th, but that final position flattered them a little bit. That bad run in March cost them, and in the final reckoning, it was it Sheffield United went up?
Yeah, and Blackburn Rovers top, Sheffield United second.
Yeah.
Sheffield Wednesday third, and we were 4th. But we have finished above. I mean, we finished above the mighty Manchester City, who only 2 seasons previously had won the league, as in like the first division.
Yes.
So that was quite an achievement. I mean, at the time we were managed by Harry Storer, who was a bit of a character, wasn't he? I mean, this is a guy who I believe was a cricketer and played as many matches of cricket as he did football. And,
he did. He was. His father was a Test cricketer. His name was Harry Storer. Back in the Victorian times, he was a England Test player, and Harry was a very useful player. He played for Derbyshire County Cricket Club. He in 1936, City won the 3rd Division South, and Derbyshire won the county championship, and he was a member of that team.
And I think in later years he got Birmingham promoted and Derby promoted, I think. So as a manager, he was obviously very good.
Oh yeah, he was legendary, and it was said that Peter Taylor was a massive fan of Harry Storer, and a lot of Taylor and Clough was Harry Storer. They admired him a lot.
So, do you know what they actually admired about him then? Was it?
I think he was a dour character.
Right.
There's almost Shankly-esque stories about Storer. You know, the one story I heard was they got beaten at Highfield Road, and as the players came into the dressing room, he turned to one player and he said, "So, which hole were you hiding in?" That's right. He took him out onto the pitch. He said, "What are we doing, boss?" He said, "We're looking for the hole you've been hiding in all afternoon." That was it.
So there's sarcasm back in those days then.
Yeah.
It's not a new thing. I like that.
Yeah. But he was tremendously respected by the players. And he had an eye for spotting talent. A lot of the players he signed came from the Derbyshire area. He had his finger on the pulse in the Derbyshire area, looking out for talent, and he played with one of his players was Charlie Elliott, who again was a Derbyshire cricketer and became a Test match umpire, and he played a lot of games.
It wasn't unusual, was it, to have
no,
to play cricket and play football? It wasn't.
That's right. Well, there was far less overlap between the two seasons in those days.
Yeah.
So end of 38-39 season, finished 4th, and this City had 3 great seasons where they'd been in contention for promotion, almost throughout, and playing attractive football, scoring goals, tight defence, and of course the clouds were over Europe now. The war was being talked about that summer of 39, but City went out and paid a lot of money for a young centre forward from Preston called George Lowry. Only 19, he'd impressed at Preston in their reserves, and I think Storer thought he would be, really a real addition. They hadn't really replaced Clary Borton. McPhee had played a few games, but never really impressed. Ellis Lager was good, but not prolific enough. Crawley had a good half a season, but he fizzled out. And they had a guy called Tommy Green they bought from West Ham. He was another striker, and he played the last 9 games of that season, only scored 2 goals. I think he saw Lowry as the man to solve the goal scoring problem, and I think he would have done. But for the war. So the 39-40 season started on the 26th of August. The following Saturday, 2nd of September, City played Barnsley at home, won 4-2. Attendance, 11,000.
Right.
War was on the verge of being declared. In fact, the following morning, Neville Chamberlain was on the radio, "We've declared war with Germany." And people were very, very nervous. That's why they weren't going to the City home game the previous day. And what happened then? The following day, after war was declared, the club cancelled the contracts of every single player. Sorry, no more football. Yeah. Football suspended. We've cancelled your contract. They only retained 3 staff: Harry Storer, the manager, the secretary, whose name was it's gone, and the groundsman. So
Just in case.
yeah, but they were on half their wages.
Right.
So, and the club were in serious financial trouble. They still owed money on the Lowry transfer. They owed other transfer money. Lowry made his debut on that day before war was declared, in that 4-2 win over Barnsley. He scored a goal on his debut, and everybody thought, yeah, this is the guy. Of course, football suspended. 3 games into the season, and as I said, the club were in financial trouble, and I think that's where we maybe should just call it a day, and let's do another program, maybe the next one, talk about what happened during the war years, because the club were in dire straits. They had no income, and they had the mortgage on the ground to pay off. They had they had no gate money coming in. There was an emergency league set up. Maximum of 8. The government only allowed a maximum of 8,000 fans to go. In actual fact, very rarely was 8,000 reached, and then the gate receipts had to go to charity. So, as I said, there was no gate money coming in. There were bills to pay. The club were in dire trouble.
Yeah, and I suppose, with the war happening, it's a secondary thing to go to a football match, isn't it? There's more important things to deal with.
Yes. Yeah. I think from a war angle, I think the day before that final game, they were already sending children out of London. What do you call it? The
evacuation.
Evacuation, yeah. Children being evacuated from London on that Friday before the game. And Germany invaded Poland on the Saturday, and war was declared on the Sunday morning.
So we can blame Hitler for our chances of maybe getting promoted.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. He's affected a lot of lives. If it wasn't for Hitler, my parents wouldn't be in England, and my wife's parents wouldn't have, well, her dad wouldn't have been in England because he was a Jewish refugee who came from Austria. So in a sort of morbid way, we sort of say, well, if it wasn't for Hitler, we'd have never met. We'd have been in different countries. It's amazing how that one thing changed a lot of lives dramatically.
Yes. And he a year later, he would have a massive other effect on the city of Coventry, with the Blitz. So we've got a lot to blame him for.
And so it's interesting that was Jim, because I don't think people realise just how close we were to achieving promotion to the big league way back, nearly 100 years ago.
Yes, but as I said earlier, there was a feeling amongst fans, some fans, that the club didn't want to get promotion. If you read the letters page of the Pink back in that era, there were a lot of negatives. The question was posed: do the club really want promotion? We've sold Leslie Jones. We haven't really replaced him. They're not spending a lot of money in the transfer market. And the club was run on a very, very tight ship. That £20,000 loan from John Sidley was they really pushed the boat out to get that money and build the stand. Obviously not knowing that war was on the horizon.
Yeah. Well, if you want to contact us and talk about a particular part of our Sky Blue history, you can please email Jim at clarryborton@gmail.com. If you watch the YouTube channel, you'll see it on the ticker going across the screen throughout the whole episode. We're happy to talk about anything, even if it's a brief thing about something, or maybe you want to know, you got a little question about something or someone or an incident, and Jim will no doubt talk about it.
Yeah,
I
or
might even be
a
able to
famous
help.
game,
Yeah.
or somebody's first game. We can talk about that. Yeah, it'd be great.
Yeah, and even I might be able to help. But I've enjoyed that tonight, Jim. That was excellent, and we'll be back next week.
Yes.
And cheerio.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Radio Company.